The reason why we have the names Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is thanks to the Catholics. And if you ever read the Gospels horizontally, where you compare each resurrection account, there seems to be a lot of contradictions, and it's not just an eyewitness.
Here's one of the problems that I think some skeptics have with the scriptures, is they want to say that they're too divergent to have been true. Yet on the other hand, if they were exactly the same, they'd say, well, they were just copied from one another. There are 59 eyewitness details in that document called the Gospel of John that could only have been known by an eyewitness or somebody who knew an eyewitness.
Okay, is it possible that someone could have just been writing a story?
But here's what's fascinating. The actual pattern of the resurrection narratives is exactly what you'd expect from multiple eyewitnesses describing a real historical event.
Name?
Right, but I want to talk about the Gospels.
What's your name?
Rachel.
Hey, Rachel.
They're not necessarily eyewitness accounts. They're written in the third person, and the reason why we have the names Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is thanks to the Catholics putting those labels on there. So I guess I don't understand why you say they are eyewitness accounts.
Why do I think they're eyewitness accounts?
Right.
Because they contain eyewitness data. Like, for example, the Gospel of John, there are 59 eyewitness details in that document called the Gospel of John that could only have been known by an eyewitness or somebody who knew an eyewitness.
Okay, is it possible that someone could have just been writing a story?
Well, then you'd have to discount all the other evidence that this doesn't appear to be a story. It appears to be a historical account.
From the Bible, right? The Bible is writing about, like, Mark is the first gospel that was written. And
probably. Some think Matthew may have been written first. Most scholars say Mark was written first.
Okay, so we'll go with the general consensus, I guess. And then they say maybe Matthew and Luke used a lot of Mark. That's why there's a lot of coinciding events. And if you ever read the Gospels horizontally, where you compare each resurrection account, there seems to be a lot of contradictions, and it's not just an eyewitness
What would those contradictions?
Well, for example, I think in Mark, the ladies go to the tomb, and Jesus isn't there, and an angel tells them to go tell the people, but they don't. It just ends, and then something else is added on about snakes. And then Matthew, he goes ballistic and says there's angels and earthquakes and everything at the resurrection. And they tell her to go tell them to go tell the disciples, and they do this time. Luke reins it in a little bit, and he says the stone was already rolled away, and the angel is sitting on the tomb. Or I don't have this exactly correct, but it's the gist. And then John, being the beloved disciple, made himself, or whoever wrote it, made himself get there first before Peter. And I don't know, there's just a lot of contradictions.
How are those contradictory? I don't see them contradictory. I see them complementary because they're written by different people telling their perspectives on. How are they contradictory?
How did Luke miss the earthquakes and the angels? That seems like a big detail.
If he doesn't report an earthquake, that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
It doesn't mean it did.
No, but it's not a contradiction.
Well,
like, for example, if somebody came into this, some reporter came into this room tonight and said Frank Turek gave a presentation, that would be true. And if somebody else came into this room and said Frank Turek spoke and so did Dr. Ben Gates, that would be true as well. That would be complementary. That would not be contradictory.
Right, but those are ordinary. Those are just ordinary circumstances, ordinary things. Those are not hard to believe. When something extraordinary happens, like there's angels and earthquakes and stones rolling away and
But they're not contradictory. You might say, well, I would hope this would be in here. See, here's one of the problems that I think some skeptics have with the scriptures, is they want to say that they're too divergent to have been true. Yet on the other hand, if they were exactly the same, they'd say, well, they were just copied from one another. See,
the Gospels have both, exactly the same and different.
Right, because they are witnessing the same events, so you're going to have some overlap, and then you're going to have some differences. Let me give you a couple of examples of this. Do you know that when the Titanic went down, some eyewitnesses said it broke in two, and other eyewitnesses said, no, it went down whole? Does that mean that we can't trust the Titanic sank?
No, that doesn't. That is not a miraculous occurrence.
Leave miracles out for a second. Is that a contradictory? Well, it seems contradictory, right?
Well,
But what do they agree on?
that the Titanic sank.
Right, exactly.
And they lived to tell about it.
Right, so every single gospel says there was a resurrection. They may tell the story a little bit different way and have different details in there, and even if there are contradictions, that does not disprove the fact that there was a resurrection.
All right, let's talk about that. The claim that the resurrection stories in the Gospels contradict each other. You'll often hear skeptics say, well, Matthew says one thing, John says another, so clearly the resurrection accounts can't be trusted. But that's actually misunderstanding how eyewitness testimonies work. When you look at the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, what you're seeing isn't four copies of the same story. You're seeing four different perspectives on one incredible event. And honestly, that is exactly what you'd expect if these accounts were real eyewitness testimonies rather than rehearsed fabrications. Think about it this way. If you and 3 other people witnessed a major event, say, a car accident, and all 4 of you wrote down exactly the same story, word for word, people would actually suspect collusion. It would sound staged, not genuine. But if each of you told the truth from your own angle, with your own memory and focus, you'd highlight different details. Yet all your stories would point to the same core truth. That's what's happening with the resurrection. Matthew emphasizes the women at the tomb, because in his culture, that detail was shocking and powerful. Luke gives more of the historical structure, focusing on the road to Emmaus and the disciples' gradual realization. John zooms in on the personal, Mary Magdalene's encounter with the risen Jesus, Thomas touching his wounds. And Mark. He's raw and fast-paced, capturing the initial astonishment and fear. None of these accounts cancel each other out. They complete each other, like 4 camera angles of the same event. When you line them up, the picture that emerges isn't confusion, it's depth. And here's what's fascinating. All of them, without exception, agree on the central fact that the tomb was empty, that Jesus appeared alive to his followers, and that those encounters changed them forever. So, no. The Gospels aren't contradictory. They're complementary. They give us a multi-dimensional, human, and deeply consistent record of the same extraordinary reality, that Jesus, who was crucified and buried, actually rose from the dead. And that's exactly why historians, even skeptical ones, take these accounts seriously, because they don't read like myth or conspiracy, they read like people describing something so shocking that it changed the world forever. Okay, let's talk about that, because this is one of those moments where you realize that for some skeptics, no matter what the evidence says, it's never going to be just right. Here's what I mean. Skeptics often say the Gospels don't match perfectly. Look at these differences in the resurrection accounts. But if the stories were perfectly identical, word for word, event for event, they'd turn right around and say, well, clearly this was copied, rehearsed, or made up later. So which is it? Because they can't have it both ways. If the Gospels had been mirror copies of each other, historians would have dismissed them immediately as collusion, evidence that the writers coordinated their stories to make them sound believable. But since they don't match perfectly, since each writer tells the story from a slightly different angle, skeptics then say, see? That means they can't be trusted. It's like they're setting up a test that can never be passed. If the accounts are too similar, it's fake. If they're too different, it's false. Either way, the conclusion is already decided before the evidence is even considered. But here's what's fascinating. The actual pattern of the resurrection narratives is exactly what you'd expect from multiple eyewitnesses describing a real historical event. Each gospel writer records what stood out most to them, who they interviewed, what details they remembered. And yet, all 4 accounts converge on the same undeniable truth. The tomb was empty. Jesus appeared alive to his followers, and those encounters turned fearful, broken people into unstoppable witnesses. That's not the pattern of fabrication. That's the pattern of reality. So the real issue isn't whether the Gospels are consistent. They are, when you read them carefully. The real issue is that some people aren't honestly examining the evidence. They're just looking for any reason to deny what it points to. Because if Jesus truly rose from the dead, then it changes everything. And maybe that's what makes people uncomfortable, not that the story isn't credible, but that deep down it is. Here's the irony no one talks about. Skeptics say the Gospel resurrection accounts are not identical, contradiction. But if the accounts were perfectly identical, they would say they clearly copied each other, fabrication. This reveals something important. Many critics aren't actually seeking truth. They're seeking permission to deny it, in real historical investigation and real courtroom testimony. When multiple witnesses give the exact same details, word for word, we suspect collusion. When their stories agree on the core event but differ in peripheral details, we trust they're independent and authentic. And what do the Gospels give us? Perfect unity in the central claim. The tomb was empty. Jesus physically rose. He appeared to his followers. Natural variation in the surrounding details. Which women arrived first? How many angels? Which moment the disciples understood, not contradiction. Corroboration through diversity.
Why would you
It could
have...
just be a story.
But then
You're giving, this is what I feel like. I haven't heard evidence for your resurrection. I hear assertions and appealing to emotion. I haven't seen any evidence.
What would you consider to be evidence other than eyewitness accounts?
Eyewitness accounts are usually the most least reliable evidence.
So how do you know anything from the ancient world?
I don't. I have to go by, it's the thing that makes the Bible unbelievable are the miracles that are in it.
Okay, so you have a philosophical presupposition against miracles then. Meaning you're ruling out miracles. Anything that has a miracle in it you won't believe.
Well, you want to say the ancient world. You want to Caesar, I can believe what I read about him because he doesn't claim to do miraculous things.
That's what I mean by philosophical bias.
Okay.
You're ruling out miracles. And to be honest with you, you're probably on the side of most scholars. Most scholars will say, look, if it's got the miraculous in it, I can't believe it. The problem is the miraculous is possible because the first verse of the Bible appears to be true. There appears to be a God. Then the miracles are possible.
You're reading the first verse of Genesis with your Christian eyes. You're not reading it in historical context. But also the, what is it? The Quran has miraculous claims.
What do you think the
believe
proper
those?
interpretation of the first verse of Genesis means? What is it?
I don't know, but I can tell that you're reading it with your Christian lens.
All it says there was a beginning, right? That God created the heavens and the earth.
Well, I mean, technically, was it a beginning, or was the universe just in a different state? Was it just in a different form?
Well, it says there was a beginning.
The Bible does.
Yes, and science, the scientists,
Currently, the science says that.
Including Einstein, is saying that the universe had a beginning through his theory of general relativity.
Maybe this current state of the universe had a beginning.
The universe can't be eternal, otherwise today never would have gotten here.
That's gibberish. I don't know what you're saying when you say that.
Let me ask you a question. If Christianity were true, would you be a Christian?
If the Holy Spirit convicted me and brought me to it, I probably would have no choice.
Oh, no, you always have a choice.
Not if I was led by the Holy Spirit.
Oh, you can resist the Holy Spirit. A lot of people do.
Oh, well, then I don't know. I was a Christian.
If I gave you a book, would you read it?
My mom, I think, is going to buy it.
But that wasn't my question, Rachel. If I gave it to you, would you read it?
I could read it, and I could do a YouTube response, I guess.
You really sound open, you know?
All right.
Rachel, think about this. If God exists, if he does, and if the story of Jesus is true, isn't that the greatest news in history?
Oh, not for those going to hell.
Nobody has to go. That's the whole point.
Well, if they're not convinced that what they're reading in the Bible is true.
I said if it was true. Isn't it great news?
I guess. Yeah,
Great,
we get to
you're with
spend
me.
eternity. And
Skeptics claim they want evidence. But what they want is silence. Let's expose the logic. If the gospel details differ, can't be trusted. If the gospel details match, too perfect, forgery. No level of accuracy satisfies someone who has already decided to reject the conclusion. This isn't a problem of evidence, it's a problem of the will. Real history is always multi-angle. Think about any major world event covered by multiple journalists. Every report looks different. Why? Because people see different details, but the truth emerges through the composite picture. And here's what the composite picture says. A Jewish teacher named Jesus was executed, buried, and then days later his followers were proclaiming, even unto death, that they saw him alive. The real question skeptics must answer. Not, why are the stories not identical? But, how did the earliest disciples become so convinced Jesus rose without a single alternate explanation holding weight 2,000 years later? They weren't defending a metaphor. They weren't risking their lives for a parable. They were eyewitnesses claiming something earth-shattering happened. Their refusal isn't due to lack of evidence. It's because if Jesus rose from the dead, then he is who he says he is. His authority is real. The world isn't ours to define. The resurrection isn't rejected because it's unbelievable.